medicine, fast forward medical innovation, are running Biomedical Innovation 101. They're going to be talking all about research commercialization, covering drug discovery and therapeutics, diagnostics, digital health, biomedical device development, as well as next steps. I love how they do this for their faculty, but they also make it available to the community and bring in folks from the community. So we'll look forward to seeing you at those seminars. And then late next year, November 14th through 16th, we were asked to make everyone aware that the Combination Product Summit is coming back to Columbus, Ohio. And October 8th through 10th, the eye and the chip. We had Dr. Hesberg on a few weeks ago. It was absolutely amazing, this research that they continue, and they have this World Congress, both for the eye and the chip, assisted vision, as well as the eye, the brain, and the auto. How does eyesight and cognition and transportation all factor together? Absolutely fascinating stuff. We were thankful to have him on the show, and those are coming up at the end of next year. Well, with that, we turn our attention to FDA and industry news. And there's one item today, but it's a long one. So that wasn't meant to put you off. But FDA has been, I think, rightly taking a break over the holidays, except they didn't entirely. They were busy issuing reclassifications. And so the title of our segment today, Opening New Doors, 8 new FDA reclassifications. And actually, at the time we went to press with our advertising, it was 8. We did find a 9th one. There may be more. But the point here is to introduce you to this concept of device reclassification. It's something that you probably haven't thought a lot about. But as you consider what kinds of pathways are available to take a device through the FDA, this is an important one to understand. Now, most people are familiar with Class 1 devices, and they think, okay, those are relatively easy to get on the market, and they're relatively right. And there are Class 2 devices, and they usually require a 510K. That's great. And then there are PMAs, or pre-market approval Class 3 devices. And these devices, everybody knows, are hard to get on the market. And people are increasingly familiar with the de novo pathway, but not a lot of people are familiar with why the de novo exists. And it comes down to this. There's a catch-all in the FDA's world, and it's this idea of an automatic Class 3 designation. See, the problem is this, that if something doesn't fit into a 510K and it's not a Class 1, it pretty quickly ends up being a Class 3 device. And that creates some problems. Problems that the de novo program are designed to solve, especially de novo with direct access to the program. It used to be that you had to get denied for a 510K before you could access this program. But now you can go direct to the de novo program, and where you might have otherwise gotten dumped into a Class 3 device, you can be reclassified into Class 2 as long as you prove safety and efficacy. So the basis for getting a de novo is not substantial equivalence to some other device. It's from scratch safety and efficacy of your device. So it's a good bit of work, but not as much as getting a PMA. Well, here's a consequence of that. When you successfully get your de novo, it turns out that the FDA basically creates a whole new category. Congratulations, you're a trailblazer. They reclassify whatever it is that you brought to market into usually Class 2, and they give it a name, and they give it some other things that we'll be talking about here in just a second. Now, is reclassification good or bad? Well, it's got some upsides and it's got some downsides. The disadvantage is that in some way you're trailblazing for your competitors, because now your competitors will be able to submit a 510K for the exact same thing as you have, with a caveat, but you have opened that pathway for them. They won't have to do a PMA. They won't have to do a de novo. They will be able to do a 510K. But here's the advantage. Going through the de novo process and being able to get there and have it reclassified allows you to participate in the establishment of what are called special controls. We'll be talking about these special controls in just a second, but really what this is what hoops have to be jumped through in order to get a device cleared. Now, normally special controls for your average 510K aren't that overbearing. There's a lot of things you have to do to get a 510K, but it's infrequent that there are tons and tons of special controls. Not so with Class 2 categories made through the de novo process. These often have many, many special controls associated with them. I'll read you some in just a minute. But here are the 8 devices we're going to be talking about today. And the very first one of those is actually one that we've certainly heard about on the show before, because Ann Arbor's own Jen Baird, founder of this company, Fifth Eye, they just got their reclassification listed with the FDA. They've had their de novo and other clearances for a while. But just at the end of December, the reclassification for Fifth Eye's adjunctive hemodynamic indicator with decision point made its way through the FDA, got published in the Federal Register. And I'm sorry I don't have all this stuff to show you with graphics, but it's a lot of text anyways. FDA says that an adjunctive hemodynamic indicator with decision point is a device that identifies and monitors hemodynamic conditions of interest and provides notifications at a clinically meaningful decision point. You're trying to warn practitioners that something's coming up. It's intended to be used adjunctively along with other monitoring and patient information. So those of you in the local ecosystem obviously know this is a device that reads ECG leads and or a single ECG lead and gives predictive information. Now, what's so interesting about this? Well, in reviewing Fifth Eye's de novo, along the way, FDA and the company identified risks. Here's 2 risks that they say he has associated with it. And this is not anything bad. There's risks associated with every device. One is delayed or incorrect treatment due to erroneous output as a result of software malfunction or algorithm error. They say that the mitigation for this is software verification, validation, hazard analysis, non-clinical performance testing, clinical data, and labeling. There's also the potential for delayed or incorrect treatment due to user misinterpretation. And so usability assessments and labeling are part of the mitigation for that. Well, why do we mention this? Who really cares? It's because these risks and these mitigations make their way into the specific special controls. So if you're coming along and you're a company that wants to do what Fifth Eye has done, well, good news for you. They have trailblazed. They have made a way to do it. Congratulations to the team. But if you want to do it and you want to file a 510K, you now have special controls that you have to jump through. And I won't belabor all of these, but for example, there's stuff relating to software, full characterization of technical parameters, including the algorithms, expected impact, specification of acceptable incoming sensor data quality. The list just goes on and on and on. It's quite a long list, just looking through here for some of the more interesting aspects of it. They talk about comparable to, it's got to be comparable to references. Now, what's fascinating about this is a company like Fifth Eye has already been through it. They've already succeeded. They know what they did, and they know that it worked, and they are already in control of all that information. If you want to come fresh to this, FDA is not going to necessarily tell you exactly how to do it because they're not going to give away somebody else's proprietary information. But now each one of these hoops, and there's quite a few of them. There's probably five points, with each one having 5 or 6 subpoints. You now have to satisfy each of those. And it might have been that FDA would have asked you if you had done your own de novo, certainly. But now the bar is already set. So in that sense, it does make it harder for a company to follow along. It's not just an open gate, even though the roadway is there. The next one is a company called FEOps that got cleared for interventional cardiovascular implant simulation software device. If that sounds confusing, let me read you what that is. An interventional cardiovascular implant simulation software device is a prescription device that provides a computer simulation of an interventional cardiovascular implant device. Imagine that. Inside a patient's cardiovascular anatomy. It performs computational modeling to predict the interaction of the interventional cardiovascular implant device with the patient's specific anatomical environment. So you take a scan of the person, you take this device, and you use computer simulation to model how it's going to interact. FDA has cleared this. They've cleared it for this company called FEOps, who trailblazed the way. But of course now there is a long laundry list of special controls that are required in order to get that through if you want to follow in FEOps' footsteps. There's warnings, there's labeling, there's certain expectations for human factors evaluation. It's kind of amazing how all this stuff is there, and it seems all logical. And yet I think when you get into the details of these, I shouldn't say logical, of course it's logical, but the reality is that it may be so specific to the company that came before that you're going to have to do a lot of work to understand how to meet point A, point B, point A1, point A2, point A3, and so on and so forth. But another example of this, let's go to the third one really quick. A resorbable implant for ACL injuries. Of course, this is a big issue, torn ACLs from Mayak Orthopedics. And this is a degradable material. So this is actually a biodegradable material that allows for healing of a torn ACL. So you put it in there, you stabilize it using traditional suturing procedures. And the device is intended to protect the biological healing process from the surrounding environment. And it's not intended to replace the suturing process that goes on. But this stuff just falls away eventually, gets bioresorbed, and that's pretty cool. It's a Class 2 product now, so very cool to have something like that in Class 2. But once again, a long list. Things you have to evaluate there. You have to do post-operative evaluation of knee pain and function, durability as assessed by re-tear or reoperation rate. You've got to look at the resorption rate, of course, of the material, gross necroscopy and histopathology. And this is about as long a list as all of the other ones as well. So it's cool to find these things. As we get, we're nearly about halfway through the list here. Why are these interesting and why are these important? Well, as you're going through as a company, as an innovator, as an investor, as a mentor, as somebody in this industry, and you're thinking, how do I help a given project move forward? And you think you know what the regulatory landscape looks like, it's an always changing landscape. And this is one of the things that I know in our practice we don't particularly like when people say, oh, I made you a roadmap. Well, that roadmap can change, and these days that roadmap can change quickly. It depends on what claims the company is trying to make. If you change your claims slightly, your roadmap may change. But on top of that, they're rebuilding different roadways under our feet as we speak. So if you were trying to make the decision, do I or do I not go down a certain path because it may be too trailblazing, Well, every year, new products are coming out, and they're not just coming out and it means nothing for you. It means that the pathways have changed, and now your evaluation becomes different. Am I going to go this alone? Am I going to get that de novo? Well, that might not be the only option anymore. But now you have to evaluate. The FDA's bar has been set. There are expectations around what data you have to bring and what testing you have to do and what your design has to accomplish. So while it's more clear, that burden may be more than you want to bite off. Let's go on to the next one. An extracorporeal system for carbon dioxide removal. This assists carbon dioxide removal from the patient's blood in patients with acute respiratory failure, where other available treatment options have failed. So this is only for what we might call emergency use. This can include hardware, software, disposables, a gas exchanger, blood pump, cannulae, tubing, filters, and other accessories. There's a lot that can go into this. But if it's being used for emergency use, if it's all other options have failed, then it can be a Class 2 510K device. And it's interesting because they have lists here for things like mechanical integrity, durability, reliability. They've got things that you would expect, like biocompatibility, software validation, sterility, of course, of all parts. How could you not in a system like that? This one, in reading it, doesn't look a lot different than what you would expect to have to do for most 510Ks. So while some new de novo classifications will call out things like clinical trials, now there's no way around getting around clinical trials for a particular classification. In this one, it looks relatively run-of-the-mill. You would expect to have to do most of this stuff if you were doing the 510K anyways. So this requires digging and looking, because the fact that somebody just came before you with a de novo doesn't really mean you can just say, oh, it's going to be easier. Nor can you say it's going to be, doesn't really mean you can just say, oh, it's going to be easier. Nor can you say it's going to be harder. They may have, in fact, made your pathway quite nice and really just opened the path to the 510K. If you're coming second, that could be some really good news. Our fifth one is this, a pediatric autism spectrum disorder diagnosis aid. And this from the company Cognoa. They define this. It's intended as an aid in the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Now, of course, this is not as high risk, you would think, as some of the ones we've just talked about. And as a result, there's not a lot in the special controls that really would be that shocking, I guess. Statements, adverse events, cutoff values for diagnosis, positive predictive value, negative predictive value, clinical interpretation descriptions, instructions for use, labeling has to include certain things, usability assessment. But again, all of these things you'd be doing anyways for a 510K. So in this case, doesn't change it much. If you're coming in Cognoa's footsteps, you might view that this de novo now has just opened a pathway that if you want to follow, the special controls burden at least is not that crazy high. The sixth one by Cosmo Artificial Intelligence, Gastrointestinal Lesion Software Detection System. We're going to be telling you about MEDICA in just a bit, and I know how the German language works a bit, where you just string words together, and some of these names feel a bit like that. We're just stringing the words together, but it's a computer-assisted detection device used in conjunction with endoscopy for the detection of abnormal lesions in the gastrointestinal tract. So you've got an endoscope and you've got this software system that helps you find abnormal lesions. It's looking for weird things. It brings attention to images to aid in the detection of lesions. So it's not saying, hey, we identified something and we diagnosed it. It's just saying, hey, practitioner, might want to stop here and have a closer look. Now, something like this, they do have some very, very specific things that pop out here. They talk about non-clinical performance testing. Well, that's not surprising. But within that, standalone algorithm performance testing, pixel level comparison of degradation of image quality due to the device. So here's a very, very specific assessment that they want you to complete. Now, whether or not a guidebook exists as to how to do pixel level comparison of degradation of image quality is anyone's guess. So if this is a path you want to walk, you're going to need to learn how to do that before you ever embark out on this path to satisfy FDA. Assessment of video delay due to marker annotation. Assessment of real-time endoscopic video delay due to the device. And you have other things too, software verification and validation, electromagnetic compatibility, and things like that. But this is an example of a place where some of the things that you have to do are things that are not immediately obvious that you need to dig into. So while the gate has been opened, while a 510K is possible, you do have to study what it was that your competitor did to get it through and trust that you can give those same kinds of evidences with the right kind of work. The next to last one is from Medtronic, a neuromodulation device, brain stimulation programming planning software to assist in planning stimulation programming for implanted brain stimulators. And a lot of the aspects here, it's actually a really, really short one. The special controls are incredibly short here. I'm just looking through the list. I don't think there's anything here that really jumps out beyond what you would have to do for a 510K. So once again, here's a place where a big company like Medtronic, even though they might have been able to finagle some bigger special controls, they got themselves through, and they seem to have opened the door for anyone else who wants to go in this direction, because software verification, validation, and hazard analysis are not surprising. Usability assessment, not surprising. Labeling with a little bit of specification around that, not surprising. But that's about it. Those are the special controls. Now, when I say that's about it, I don't mean that's all you have to do, right? You have to do all the normal things that you would have to do for a 510K. You've got your design controls, you've got your design history file, you've got your quality systems that'll be coming along down the pike. But the special controls are above and beyond those things. And in this case, they're not very large. Let's take a look at our last one. This one is a bone indentation device, a device that measures resistance to indentation in bone, put out by Active Life Sciences. So for this one, they have in vivo performance testing. So you've got to do it in live animals. And it's got to evaluate the risk of bone fracture, soft tissue damage, pain, discomfort, bruising, or bleeding. There's got to be non-clinical performance testing that it's not surprising stuff here. There's human factors testing, not surprising. Biocompatibility, not surprising. Sterility, reprocessing. None of this is actually that shocking, even though this list goes on a little bit longer than some of the others. And so by the time you get to the end, you realize about the only thing that's kind of novel here is the in vivo testing. So if you weren't planning on doing in vivo testing and you wanted to do a bone indentation device, that'd be something you'd want to add to your project plan to be able to know that you were going to get to where the FDA wanted you to be. So, quiet holiday for the FDA for a lot of their news, except for all these reclassifications that got issued out here at the end of December, and there are more than this. But what's the real upshot? The real upshot here for all of us in the community is that the pathways that are available for companies to traverse are constantly changing. And if 3 months ago you thought that your only pathway through the FDA was a de novo, keep an eye on these lists. Because if it turns out that there was a reclassification order, there's now a 510K pathway for a device potentially like yours. The only hiccup is that the special controls have also been issued along with that. And if you want to get through the FDA, now the FDA and your competitor have set a bar of those special controls. You have to understand them, you have to comply with them, and if they've been made a little bit harder, there could be a gotcha in there. So that's our news for the day. Next up, I want to tell you just a bit about the MEDICA trade show that we were privileged to be at in Dusseldorf, Germany, in November of this last year. The post-show report from MEDICA, it is one of the largest medical device trade shows in the world. The place on the north side of Dusseldorf, the trade show floor, if you've ever been on a trade show floor, you know these buildings are gigantic. There were 17 of those buildings. There were 17 buildings, any one of which could have held most trade shows you've ever been at. MEDICA and CompuMed were co-located. There were more than 81,000 visitors from 173 countries, 5,000 exhibitors from 70 countries. And we got to be there along with the MEDC. Brendan Cherry led that delegation. And what we're going to do here in just a second is we're going to show you a video, part of the video that we took there. We did a bunch of interviews. And we're going to show you there were 6 Michigan companies that took kiosks at the booth in MEDICA, at MEDC's booth. And so we're going to introduce you, Intubeing was one of those, but you know about us. We're going to introduce you to 5 of those companies at the beginning of our little video. And at the end, we've got an interview with Brendan Cherry, who's going to tell us about these international trade delegations that MEDC runs, why international trade is important. And before we run that video, here's the upshot. I think one of our goals is to let people know what's going on with all these partner organizations in the state of Michigan. There's so many cool groups doing so much. And we often think of the new technologies. We think of the startups. We think of the really cool MedTech startups that are going out there and trying to raise money and trying to get their very, very first product on the market. Well, that's cool. But there's also a lot of companies in Michigan that are supporting the medical device industry and the MedTech industry in general that are out there selling not only to the U.S., but are selling internationally. In order to be eligible for this trade delegation, you had to be selling internationally. And you're going to hear from some companies that, as one of them mentions, if you've ever had a blood test, you've probably touched our product. That's quite a claim. It's a Michigan company. So with that, we're going to show you some of these highlights from MEDICA. I'll be back with you at the end. But look forward to a few more weeks of some of the highlights from MEDICA.
All right, hello, my name is Dave Hagsma, and I'm the owner, founder, CEO of Medicus Health. We've developed a lot of unique and hard-to-find items that most people don't offer and really have a hard time sourcing. And I think it's important for us to be here at MEDICA because MEDICA is the trade show for the world in terms of medical. And we have a lot of items that we think can help people not only in the USA and North America, but also here in Europe and throughout Asia. And this is the place where we can go and meet all those people in one place and get a lot of the things that we come up with are infection control products, including surgery and laboratory items. That's the kind of thing that we can do. We can take the specifications that our end users require, match those to products that we can get made in the USA, made at high quality, consistently, and on time, and deliver those to our customers, hopefully around the world.
Hi, welcome to MEDICA. My name's Tim Hatt. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Oxys America. We're located in Auburn Hills, Michigan, and we are OEM manufacturer, engineering and design firm, as well as a service parts manufacturer for the oxygen concentrator business in America and now in Europe. We've been pursuing business in Europe for 18 months, and we've hit a critical mass. And we've come here with the MEDC to meet with customers that we've established and meet new customers here in Dusseldorf. And it's been a rocking success so far. Great show.
Hi, I'm Barney Lernis. I'm president of Humanetics Sensors, and I'm here at MEDICA in Dusseldorf, Germany for the trade show all about medical devices. Humanetics is a large industrial technology business. We've got 30% of our business focused on biomedical, and we are here to try and find new customers as we break into this segment. And it's a great opportunity for us to be here with other companies from Michigan to meet with other device manufacturers. We've got fiber optics, we've got laser micromachining, and we've got some strain gauge sensors. And we're here talking to people about how we can package this up into good solutions for new customers.
I'm Michael Craig. I work for Humphrey Products. Humphrey is a 121-year-old privately held company headquartered in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Humphrey started out in 1901 making gas lamps. They completely lit New York, Paris. And then in the 50s, when it was obvious that they needed to find something new, they got into pneumatic valves. We now have quite a few different lines in pneumatics, many of them that are centered on medical, which is what I do. I am the business development representative for Humphrey in the LSG group, the life science group. And we have a full line of medical liquid valves, proportional valves, digital valves that cover many of the things that are needed in histology, hematology, ventilation, oxygen concentration, and hemodialysis. So we're here in the booth with Michigan, promoting those products to the device manufacturers that from around the world. We currently are serving the entire world with these products, and we're just looking to make a little bit more business.
Hello, I'm Mark Metner. I'm the sales manager for TN Michigan. We're located in beautiful Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. TN specializes in the manufacture of precision balls in various ranges of plastics used in all types of medical applications, including check valves, air, and in vitro diagnostics. So virtually anything you can imagine a ball being used for, we can provide. And in addition to that, we have a Class 8 clean room certified to ISO 13485, also FDA registered, where we do contract manufacturing, various medical tubes, pregnancy test cartridges, and a multitude of other contract manufacturing in the medical market space. One thing I always let people know, if you've ever had a doctor order a blood test, there is almost a 100% chance that you've interacted with one of our products. So we're very pleased to be here. We thank the Michigan EDC for putting on a wonderful booth and allowing us to be part of this amazing, amazing MEDICA show. And as they would say here in beautiful Dusseldorf in Deutschland, Dankeschön.
Welcome back to MEDICA. I'm here with Brendan Sherry, who's leading this delegation. He's with MEDC. He's an international trade manager. Thank you, first of all, for having us here on this amazing show.
Thanks so much for coming.
Macy just gave us a tour of the booth, and it's an amazing place to be.
Fantastic.
I guess one big question is, we think of Michigan, we think of economic development. How does international trade benefit Michigan?
Well, international trade is one of the best things that could happen to Michigan. 95% of your customers are outside the U.S., so we want to make sure that you're grasping all those other countries that you could go ahead and be selling to, not just Michigan, but the rest of the world. So it helps generate more sales, which then hopefully would lead to more employment, better paying jobs, all within Michigan.
Also more stability, because I think you were mentioning to me earlier, diversification actually leads to stability. Not something that has sort of gone through my mind, but if I've got one little niche market.
Yes, that too. I mean, you know, as we've experienced recessions in the past, and specifically in the U.S., you want to make sure that you have other, what's the word I'm looking for? Other anchors, so to speak, in terms of if there's a problem in the U.S. or recession, you have other markets that are perhaps doing quite well and it's not affecting you as much. So you want to have those other lifelines, so to speak, that you can delve into and make sure and be selling during those tough times within the U.S. or Michigan.
A little portfolio diversification there.
Yes.
Well, tell us, Brendan, about your role as an international trade manager.
As an international trade manager with the MEDC, I'm responsible for Southeast Michigan. And basically what I do is I sit down and help companies that want to expand more internationally. We sit down, we do an assessment, and basically I see about how I can best help them via my experience previously in the private sector doing international sales, my time with the MEDC, and the services that we provide at MEDC.
That's awesome. It's much like what I do in my own role. You can sit down with somebody and go like, hey, how can we help you? What are those services that you offer? What can people avail themselves of?
We have a pretty big amount of services. It's actually really beneficial to our Michiganders. So I guess to start, we have foreign offices throughout the globe that are foreign nationals of those specific countries that work full-time for Michigan in terms of like we have someone in Mexico, we have someone in Brazil, we have someone here in the EU, we have someone in China. Basically any major country, we have someone there. And they have at no cost services for Michigan-based companies that want to do anything from just, hey, we're looking for distributors, we're looking for information on regulatory procedures, we're looking for partners, any kind of specific law to a certain country that would affect a Michigan business trying to export or sell there. That's one of our major ones. We also have two kind of internet-based providers or web developers, if you will. One of them is through a partner that we work through. It's the SEO search, which is search engine optimization. Had to remember that for a second. And we do that through a partner, and it's a at no cost service again. And what they will do is the company will say, hey, we want to know how we show up in Spain, right? Our product or our service. And so what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll say, hey, okay, here's how you guys show up in Spain. And they might do another country like France as well. And then you also give a name of a competitor, and they say, this is how your competitor shows up in a web search in Spain and France. And again, that's at no cost to you. Another one we have that is an at-cost service is called IBT Online. And what they do is they basically really help develop your website. They do everything from translation to, you know, of course, specific languages, to localization, and that can be with specific dialects, that can be with colors, currency, and a lot of back-end details in terms of specific ranking, posting, things of that nature, so it shows up better in that country search engine. Like we use a lot of Google here, or I mean in the US and most of EU, I believe, but when you get into China and other markets, it's Baidu, so you want to make sure that your website is optimized and localized for a search engine like Baidu, because not all countries use the same search engine. Those are kind of online services that have been very popular during the past pandemic. I'm trying to think. We work with a couple universities, MSU. MSU gives kind of a very generalized research, a little bit for exporters that aren't maybe sure where they want to go. They'll take a look at your product and they'll take a look at countries that may be a good match and put a list together of where you should go. Another one is through Grand Valley State out west in Grand Rapids. And they'll do a lot more technical training in terms of import-export procedures, specific export licenses or whatnot, or procedures that you have to do for military-related or dual-use products. I'm trying to think of who else. Those are a couple. They also offer trainings there at Grand Valley State. We work with Foster Swift, that is a law firm. They can do many things for companies in terms of intellectual property, distributor due diligence, and just generalize, you know, what are you getting into when you're getting into business with this foreign partner, and making sure that you're doing everything legally and doing it so that you're going to be able to protect yourself.
A lot of really practical stuff. And I'm even here at the trade show as a part of each of the 6 companies here, you guys made lead generation available. And it's just, at first it sort of didn't quite even make sense, but then as you got into the process, it's like so practical. And it's like, hey, here's 400 companies that seem related to what you're looking for. Let's get you connected. And that kind of stuff is just so fundamental and practical. And I guess a lot of times people don't think
about the actual nuts and bolts of something like international trade?
There's a lot that goes behind the scenes, but we're of course here to help Michigan companies in any way that we can. And kind of our final service is a financing service. It's called the STEP program, State Trade Expansion Program. And what that is for eligible companies, small to medium-sized businesses, Michigan-based, they are eligible to receive up to $15,000, a maximum of $15,000 or 75% reimbursement for approved activities. Many of those are trade missions like these, or trade shows, like these, or your own international business trips that you take. Those web services that I described are STEP eligible, sample product shipping, marketing, international standards, export credit insurance premiums and whatnot. If you have a question, please let us know, and we can go ahead and figure that out for you too.
That's awesome. One last question for you, Brendan. As you think about the clients that you've worked with, there must be recurring themes and things that you would love to be able to just let them know, like things that they need to be ready for to be able to engage international trade or to engage MEDC. What would be your top 3 list of things you want them to hear from you?
Well, we're here to help, first of all. We're here to serve the people of Michigan and help you expand your international markets. I would say really know your product and know your market. Where is it best going to work, basically? We're certainly not going to be selling fur coats to people in the Caribbean. So that's a good thing to know about as well, is what I would say. Know your product, know your market, know what your in costs are going to be as well. And I guess the third thing that I would make sure that companies make sure and do is that have a really solid website. We want to have a website that looks professional, looks very modern. We don't want to have something from 1995. And we want to make sure it's very user-friendly. You can find your way around. We can easily see what your company does and what you're about. And then we can come in with the, as I talked about earlier, translation, localization, all those things to make your website easier to find and easier to read, of course, for those individuals not in the U.S.
Because those services there of localization and stuff, those are not, I'm going to write a website from scratch for you. That's, I'm going to take what you have. So you better be happy with it.
Correct. I would definitely have a solid website first before we launch into the internationalization of your website.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for all you've done and for having us here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's an amazing, amazing trade show. Just incredible. Did you know that MEDC was doing these kinds of things for the community? It really is amazing. It's also cool. TN, Humanetics, Medicus Health, Oxys, Humphrey, all these companies out there selling internationally. Oftentimes we don't think about these companies, but they're in your backyard if you're in the state of Michigan, and it's really good to see them getting out onto that world stage and selling. I will mention one of the things, and we may touch on this more in future weeks, but one of the overwhelming things, one of the reasons that Into Being went, was this whole question of what's happening in the world, what's happening in Europe, the MDR, right? So the medical device regulation as opposed to the medical device directive, which used to be how medical devices were cleared in Europe. And in our own practice, we sort of took a step back and said, let's see how this settles out. Of course, Brexit only made it worse because now there's confusion if you're in the UK, how you get a medical device cleared. All these things are swirling around. And like I said, we may touch on this more in future weeks, but there was one overwhelming sense that we took away from the show. And this has never been the case as long as we've been in this business. And before I say what it is, let me take you all the way back to a number of years ago. FDA had tried a particular type of fast track program, and their whole goal was to show that it really was possible that you could clear a device in the US faster than in Europe. And they had one of the large companies in the US pilot this fast track program. And the embarrassing part was that when all was said and done, the fast track program still didn't beat a product that went through the MDD in Europe. And that was very disappointing at the time, but that might have been 10 years ago at this point. And so the overwhelming thing that we heard from folks was basically, can we come to your country? The MDR has created such headaches over there that we were bombarded constantly by people saying, how do I come to the US with my technology? We can't keep it on the market in Europe because of the new requirements that are there. Now, sometimes they also might have underestimated what it takes to get on the market in the US, to be fair. But by and large, this is a bit of a turning point. 2022, 2023, a bit of a turning point here for companies. Where is it easiest to go first? Well, it's pretty definitively not Europe. They have pretty well turned the tables. And so if you take one thing away from that trade show with us, it's that the U.S. is really in a place to lead when it comes to what the FDA likes to call regulatory science. For as hard as it can be and as miserable as it can be, there actually are places that are worse. And right now it looks like Europe, unfortunately, is one of them. Now, the really dark side of that, that's not just interesting news. The dark side of that is that as hospitals and practitioners can't get the products that they thought that they could get, that they were used to using, what is going to happen and how is that going to change? I think that remains to be seen. But overall, that was the takeaway from MEDICA. We're going to have other interviews and more to share with you from that amazing trade show as we make our way into 2023. We're going to give just a couple minutes here in case anyone has an announcement or something that you want to tell us that's happening in the community. Maybe there's an event that we left off our events list. Be sure to tell us about it so we can keep it in front of people. We'll give just another 30 seconds to that. Or if you want to tell us what you're excited about in 2023 for your company, we're always interested to hear. The impression that we have taken away very much is that people are re-enthused. People are determined. 2023 is going someplace. But not with the January only kind of hype that you're used to with New Year's resolutions. I haven't heard anyone talking about New Year's resolutions. And yet there is this sense of renewed vigor in the community. So it's exciting to be with you. We're looking forward to a nice year of interviews, educational content. We'll be bringing you the FDA news and the local events every week. Can't wait to be with you next week. Thanks for being with us.